absolutely amazing. They're not the only owls that we have a live camera on the nest. We've also got a tawny owl nest. Here it is, big contrast. There's only one chick in this nest, and it's not on the ground, it's in a nest box. But look at it, a very contented single chick. Why is it contented? Because it's being fed an awful lot. It's obviously taking all the food, doesn't have any siblings that it needs to share it with. Bit of a dirty box there, as you can see, a bit of a poo on the back. Both the male and the female are bringing in food, although it's only the female that actually goes into the box and bringing a right variety of food. We get a closer look at what it's bringing in this time, and that's a cockchafer. That just doesn't look like it's going to fill it up. I mean, no one wants a cockchafer.
And also, have you tried them? They're really tough and chewy. They're so sort of...
No, I haven't tried one myself.
Wing cases and sticky out legs and stuff. I mean...
But then look, it's bringing in worms. As Chris said yesterday, with this rain, those worms are going to be nearer the surface. They're going to be easier for them to get and bring them in. And then we got, look, that's a show that really tumbles over. It's such a big meal. Scoffs that down. So as I say, there's a real variety of prey being brought in to this chick. Doesn't end there. The next thing that comes in, it's a bit like your short-eared owl trying to get it down in one. This is a frog. Oh, shame. I mean, look at those legs sticking out the end.
Yeah.
And then it decides just to pull little bits off.
What a diet.
I know,
Beetles, worms, rotten frogs and shrews. I mean, it's slightly better than cigarettes and alcohol, but only just, isn't it? I mean, it's pretty bad.
But that was quite comical because, you know, the parent bird came in and it was almost a panto moment where it's behind you and then it turns round and, oh, yeah, there you are. But, you know, they start branching. This is the age that chick would be branching, but, of course, it's in a nest box. So it's going to be interesting to watch to see exactly when it does come out of the nest box and start to branch out. Will it go back in the nest box?
Well, I think it's going nowhere at the moment, but it will get out onto that box and then it will, you know, get up into the tree, I think.
Yeah.
By the end of the next week, I imagine it'll be out of the box.
But it's going to grow quickly because it's the only one and it's clearly being fed a very good diet. OK, now let's go and have a look at our resident fluff ball this series. Let's have a look at our single tawny owlet.
It's just like a little fluffy potato.
Oh, it really is. Now, of course, these are a species we don't usually get them on the watches, do we? As tawny owlets, they would have, you know, fledged a couple of weeks ago. I was filming one in Cornwall and I know that left last week and that was quite late. But this one, it just doesn't want to seem to leave the box, does it?
It's absolutely in no rush. But what is interesting, I mean, I was talking to the Longshaw Rangers earlier today and they had a branched tawny owl, so a chick that has left the nest before it can fly, which is what the owls do, had been found elsewhere on the estate. So they went and popped it back up into a tree. So that shows that there are some owls here that are with that normal time. This guy seems to be a little bit delayed. And I'm involved in bird ringing, a lot of nest monitoring. And what we're finding in this spring is we expected lots of birds to go early because it's been so warm. It's been so dry. The spring has been sort of here so quickly. But what actually happens is it seems to be quite spread out. We've got birds that went early, but then we've also got birds like the little tawny owl there that seem to be surprisingly late. So it might be that the spring has impacted them in other ways. Birds that needed to get into condition perhaps by feeding on food sources that were provided by moisture. So with the ground being hard, it might have, for a tawny owl, maybe it couldn't get as much worms as it wanted. Maybe the vole cycle isn't as good. And that means that the tawny owls haven't been able to get into condition as quick. And therefore, that's maybe why we're seeing some of them a bit later. But it does seem, with blue tits, with pied flycatchers, it seems like the breeding season is really spread out. It's the sort of weird spring that we've had, or it's just been so hot and so dry since March here. It's not really rained properly for 8 weeks until Springwatch.
No, it hasn't in Cornwall either. It's been dry as a bone. So I was moaning about the wet stuff falling from the sky, but we do need it,
absolutely,
don't we?
100%. Yeah.
We do need it. And Deb Small on Instagram, she did leave a comment about the tawny owl chick. I think that's her favourite. And she was concerned that it wasn't being fed properly. But I can tell you, Deb, that our story developers filmed 5 feeds last night and that the owlet was fed frogs, voles and worms, so it's doing all right.
It's getting a decent amount of frogs. Yeah, surprisingly. Well, I mean, they will eat frogs, but just with it being so dry, I guess now it's got wet. All the frogs are coming out, and that tawny owl, it was really struggling with one earlier. It was on the BBC Two show. You could see it trying to neck this frog. But...
And we do expect it to leave the box whilst we're live, don't we?
Yeah, and it'll be really cool to see it because, like I say, these birds branch. They don't fledge, so we're not going to see it flutter out the box. We're going to see it climb up, and it'll get out onto the nest box, and then we'll hopefully then see it sort of try and climb up the tree, and it will hopefully, unless it falls to the ground, by which it'll go and find another bit it can climb up, but we should see it go up into that tree, and then we might be able to watch it sat up there being fed. But yes, if you do see a tawny owl, if you see an owlet when you're out and about, quite often people will come across them in parks and woodlands, and they'll just be sat on the floor. If it's in a dangerous area, just pick it up and put it high. But it will be being fed by an adult at night.
Stunning.
They're great birds.
Let's have a look now at our tawny owl nest. There it is. Oh, now that is it live. But it's so cute, isn't it? It is the resident fluff ball here on this Springwatch. I absolutely adore it. And oh, I think it just made a noise. So we did actually pre-record some... Oh, there it is.
It's a little contact call, I think, that.
Yeah.
It's a little call it would normally make to the adults to check whether they're there, whether they're outside. And I doubt that the female's gone too far away from it at this stage, because clearly the male's doing most of the provisioning.
Now, they are known to be our most vocal owl in the UK, aren't they? And initially at this stage, they'll start off with this kind of like raspy screeching call, and it gets louder as they get bigger, doesn't it?
But they do something else, you know. If you really aggravate them, if you go to ring them and things like that and they get cross, they click their beaks really loudly like this.
Do they?
Yeah, they'll click their beaks. The youngsters will click their beaks.
Well, look, I was going to ask you if you could do your best impression of a tawny owl. Yeah.
I'll do the female. I'm not very good at birds. You do it.
Now, we've got a question here from Amy Trewick, who has asked, what's our fluffy potato had to eat recently? So shall we go to our fluffy potato?
Yes.
Let's go live to the fluffy potato, which is a...
tawny owl chick.
Yes. Look at it.
Oh, it is brilliant.
The spirit animal of many of us after a late night shift in the story dev truck.
Exactly, yeah.
So what's it been eating?
So it's had a whole range of prey items brought into it. It's had earthworms, it's had frogs, which is just remarkable really to try and see a tawny owl chick take a frog. It's had a lot of rodents, so voles and things, and cockchafers.
So really varied.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's quite normal for these birds compared to something like a short-eared owl that's mostly bringing in small birds.
Yeah, and tawny owls...
and rodents, sorry, I should say
yes.
as well. Yeah.
A lot of voles in the short-eared owl. But tawny owls are really... I think with owls, we sort of think them as a bit softer than the bird. I mean, not in terms of the way they feel, but just in terms of their character. But tawny owls are quite vicious raptors, birds of prey, and they can take a real range of species. And I know that tawny owls will hunt things like little owls. I've seen that myself. I know that tawny owls can take things like long-eared owls, one of the biggest predators of long-eared owls. So there's really no limit to what this tawny owl might be fed. But we've seen, a lot of frogs, and it just sits there most of the day, just like that.
Like a fluffy potato.
Like a fluffy potato. But now's when it starts waking up, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we do see things like wing stretches and stuff. And actually, when you do see it scratching and stretching its wings now, we are starting to see the adult feathers coming through a little bit. So, yeah.
And when this fledges, you mentioned it with the short-eared owl a little bit, it doesn't sort of fledge, it branches, doesn't it? So what are we expecting when this tawny owl starts to think about leaving the box?
So once it starts to go, it will, well, with the box it's always a little bit different, but if it was in an open nest, it would start to head out and then come back and head out and then come back, and then they sort of go along branches and things, and that's why it's called branching, because they're just hanging out on the branches, and the parent will continue to feed it. And actually, even if that chick were to fall off of that branch, which unfortunately does happen from time to time, it will continue to call from the ground, because its feathers haven't developed enough for it to fly yet. parent will continue to feed it on the ground as well.
And we should absolutely use that to say that, as we've seen with our short-eared owls that are walking off way before they can fly, all species of owl will start exploring that area before they can fully fly. So here we're looking at the external of our tawny owl box here. It's actually a barn owl box that a tawny owl has moved into. And what it will do is it will climb out of there before it can fully fly and attempt to climb up that tree. It may well be successful, but it could also fall and hit the ground, in which case it'll scurry around and try and climb up somewhere else. So if you are out and about and you see an owlet on the floor, the chances are it's exactly where it's meant to be. So what you should do, if it's in a dangerous area, is just pick it up and pop it in a bush sort of high off the ground. Find a little branch where it can be off the ground, so it's not going to be taken by any dogs or anything like that. But it is supposed to be out even before it can fly. The likelihood is it's absolutely not been abandoned.
That's exactly the case, and actually rescue centres get a bit annoyed because people think they're doing the owl a favour by taking the owlets in, and sadly they would still be being provisioned.
Well, we've got a question here about the tawny owl from Mazza J. Why is the tawny owl spending so much time by itself?
Oh, well, sadly for this tawny owl, it's actually quite late in the season for tawny owls to be breeding. They normally breed a little bit earlier, and this did have a sibling, but before we put our cameras in, sadly the other chick passed away. So it's left alone. It's an only child, but it's doing pretty well, I'd say.
And if we're honest, that chick, selfishly for that chick, that's pretty good news. Because that chick is now going to have all of that food, all of those resources just going into that one chick, rather than having to share it with a sibling. And it's not uncommon for tawny owls just to end up with one chick. But yes, the other chick died when it was very, very small.
Oh, goodness me. Go on, I know what you're going to say, Mick.
Oh, well, your eye gets drawn to the middle one, partly because it's in the middle, but also because of the what looks like an orange background.
Let's go live to the tawny owl, the sleeping
I like
youngster.
This. I don't know, there's something about him that I really like. He's quite smug, isn't he?
Smug because he's got the whole nest box to himself. There's no competition at all. And at this time of year, tawny owls diversify their diet. They're typically dependent on small mammals, but during May, they'll branch out. They'll start eating moles, which are small mammals, of course, but also a lot of beetles, including cockchafers. Now, we've been keeping a close eye on the nest, of course. Last night, that youngster had 3 cockchafers. We went through our archives and found that it had at least 20. So these large, robust beetles, also known as mayflies, are very much on the diet of this young owl. Now, they are a beetle which you may be familiar with. They've got a long association with humans.
Anyway, we do have another species of owl. It's a tawny owl. This is one of my favourites. Let's have a look at the tawny owl live. Oh, look at the face. And if we can pull out a little bit, let's pull out and see his whole body.
Oh, so
I say he, it could be a she. And do you know what it reminds me of? It's like a potato. So we're calling it Spud. Do you remember when we were kids and we had that game that they were Spuds and you could stick eyes on them and hats and moustaches and things?
I do remember that, actually, but no one under the age of 60.
Yeah, I don't know, under the age of, I'm not 60 yet, under the age of 45, they're all going, what? But anyone over that age might remember those Spuds. So this little chick's name is Spud. I say little, not so little anymore. It's a single chick, so it's growing fast. It's also getting very curious. This was last night at 9:48. It's getting adventurous. It's hopping and flapping to reach the exit. Freedom is beckoning. There's not much to stimulate a curious chick within the 4 walls of a nest box. So at 9:50, gets a bit more determined. It glances up at the exit. It gets all of its strength. Go on, Spud, takes off, and yes, it eventually makes it. Comes out and peeks out onto a whole new world. Takes it all in. It could be a little bit overstimulating. Sure, those eyes are getting wider. You can see the head bobbing, taking in its surroundings, looking out at the world.
Imagine that for the first time.
Exactly.
Been in that
As I
box.
say,
Come out, you see all those trees.
Overstimulation. 10:15. One of the adults flies in and gives it a good feed. And you can really see the size here because this chick has grown, Chris. I mean, you can see, look at it. It's looking good. It's looking healthy. You can see a lot of, well, you can hear a lot of the calls. The chick is cheeping, and you can hear the female every so often as well. But look, you see the branches. Now, we know that owls, before they fledge, they branch out. They hop around on branches and they'll go back into the nest. That's going to be quite challenging for our little Spud, because it's quite a jump from the nest box onto one of those branches. There's a dead branch hanging down, so hopefully it'll be able to get up to that. But as I say, it could be a little bit challenging. 11:52, it's been out for quite a while. It's had enough of the new world, and it's jumped back down to stare once again at the four walls. But as I say, it'll come out and it'll branch off, and we'll see it doing a lot of that, but it's not the only one that's sitting outside the nest box. Take a look at this, because what's flying in, it's not a predator, it is a stock dove. Wouldn't predate on that chick, but I tell you what, the adult might predate on the stock dove. That's going to be messy, isn't it? And then if we go down to the ground, we can see there's a fox, and that's directly below the nest box. And as I say, when they first fledge, they're not great flyers because they do all that branching and that hopping about before they actually flap their wings and fly off. So if that chick happened to fall down to the ground,
The chips will be down for Spud.
And we can start with the owl, the myth, the legend, Spud. What's been happening to Spud, and why isn't Spud in its nest box?
Oh my goodness. Well, just look at that. We've got a camera on Spud externally.
Yeah.
Externally. He's got out of his box.
He's gone.
He's actually gone. We didn't think this day would come. But very excitingly, last night he left his box at 9:42 p.m. He jumped out, made his way on top of the box, and then, remarkably, he flew.
We were amazed.
Actually saw him spread those wings and fly.
Yeah, we were quite amazed actually to see Spud fly, because we've been talking about the owls for a while, and we've been talking about this concept of branching, and that's when the owlets will start to explore the area around the nest before they can properly fly. So what we expected, in fact the night before Spud actually left the nest box and got to the position he's in now, he came out of the nest box and he was climbing all over the tree that his nest box was in, and then he went back into the box.
Yes.
But yes, like you say, last night, or rather this morning it was,
Yeah, by the time he actually flew,
he'd climbed to the very top of his tree, and then it wasn't the most graceful. He did crash land on the floor.
he did.
But it was a pretty decent flight.
It was really good for an owlet taking its first sort of plunge into the darkness.
Yeah, totally. And I think part of the reason why Spud might have been able to fly a little bit more than we were expecting is because it was in a barn owl box. I think it's actually been a bit more difficult for Spud to get out of that box than it would have normally been. If that was a hollow in a tree, he would have found it much easier to crawl out of there onto the branches. But I think he's been forced to stay in that box a little bit longer.
Absolutely. So we think that Spud hatched around the 5th of May. And as you well know, in fact, you probably even told me, Jack, they take 25 to 30 days typically before they start to branch, which would have had him branching normally at about the 30th of May to the 4th of June. So this is almost a week later.
Yeah. So I think what we've seen inside the box is we have seen him looking up at the exit, we've seen him trying to jump, and then it's only in the last few days that he's actually been able to reach that platform to look out.
Definitely, and actually one of the things that we've seen that we've been noticing and admiring is the development of those adult feathers.
Yes, yeah,
So,
really quite well developed now. So yes, this is Spud out and about in the wild. Spent his first day enjoying the big wide world.
Indeed.
Just seeing daylight for the first time. The whole cycle of day spent outside the box for the first time.
And green instead of orange.
Yes, exactly. We've got a question here. Wow, look at Spud. Will you be able to follow him in the future? Will he be catching food on his own now? Is he catching food on his own now?
No, absolutely not. And so the parents will continue to provision Spud probably until about the end of August.
Yes. So although he's out and about, he is by no means independent.
No.
And it's going to be fed. The adults will They call constantly at this stage. In fact, now is the time of year where if you're walking in the woods in dusk, you can hear tawny owls, long-eared owls as well, short-eared owls. They all make these contact calls when they're out and about, but tawnies being the most common, you hear them when you're out in the woods. They make this little call constantly, and that's to tell the adults where they are, and the adults will keep bringing them all sorts of food. So we've not we've seen Spud leave the nest, but we're not seeing Spud become independent just yet.
No, and despite his or her excellent attempts at flying earlier today, I think they've still got a long way to go in terms of getting those graceful wings.
We may have taken a break over the weekend, but our cast of characters certainly haven't. They have carried on performing, and there's been loads of action. The star role went to Spud, our tawny owl chick. Here it is, there's Spud. That was on Saturday. Still looking up at that entrance. Remember, we left him on Thursday flying out for the first time. I say flying, literally flying up to the exit of his box and being fed on the edge there. And obviously, he's been keen over the weekend to do that many, many times.
OK, so we've started with Spud, but now we're going to switch to a different species to continue the story. Cast your mind back to the song thrushes that we were showing you. Not last weekend, but the weekend before, they were quite small, being tended by both of the parents in the nest, doing very, very well. Of course, by the end of the week, Friday last, they'd grown quite considerably. As you can see, they were on the brink of fledging. And in fact, on Friday evening, one of them got a bit fidgety and thought, I've had enough of this nest, and made that little leap into the great unknown there in the background. One of the others thought, well, I might go too, but then thought, nah, it's a bit late in the day. I fancy one more cosy night in the nest before I leave. Big mistake, because a little later on, we saw our tawny owl bringing a bird in to Spud. And when Spud jumps down into the box, you can see it's not just a bird, it is a fledgling song thrush. Now, at this point, of course, we've got no proof at all that that's the bird that's just fledged from our song thrush's nest. But what happened next at 11:06 was that the tawny owl returned. And obviously, you know, it would come to this nest and then grab those chicks. And that's what it did. And very rapidly, it killed the chicks in the nest using its talons, and then took hold of one of them and made its way out of the back of the nest. Now, okay, like I say, no proof that this is Spud's, you know, parent of any kind. This could be just another tawny owl. However, I can tell you that these two nests are only 250 metres apart. So it's getting increasingly likely, isn't it? Obviously, the owl returns. Once it's got a source of food, it's going to come back until that source of food is completely exhausted. So here it comes back and takes another one of the chicks out. But tellingly, none of these are turning up at Spud's place at this point. A little later, it returns. And here, it's interesting to see that it doesn't take a chick. Now, there were 3 in there when it launched its first attack, and it's removed 2. Where's the third one? Maybe it bolted over the side to safety. Maybe it's somewhere in the bottom of that bush doing okay. Whatever, the owl leaves on this occasion empty-handed, having removed 2 of those youngsters. Still nothing at Spud's until 3:37, hours later, when a bird is brought in, and the evidence suggests that it was a young song thrush. And then the following afternoon, a long while later, we saw that, and that was undoubtedly a song thrush chick. Now, it's just too much of a coincidence. It's pretty obvious that the song thrushes were being removed there by one of Spud's parents. Obviously, the adults came back to check, but sadly their brood had been completely extinguished, and Spud was the profiteer.
We've seen it before, haven't we, where one cast member eats the rest of the cast members. A sorry end for our song thrush chicks, but obviously that was a bounty of food for our tawny owl chick. So what happened after that? Well, old Spud was absolutely full of our song thrush chick cast members. He's full up, he's fueled, and he's ready to fly. Now, remember, at this stage, they're not very good flyers. Normally, they would jump onto a branch and just explore. But as we said at the end of last week, the closest branch to that nest box is quite high up. So to get there, he has to not rock climb, but bark climb, and he's scrambling up that tree trunk. Interestingly, he didn't go to the first bit of branch he could have gone to. He's seen the light, he's ready for flight, and he keeps climbing. And he keeps climbing because this is a brave little soul, and he goes pretty high up. Then as it gets dark, that's the parent that just flew in. We've circled where Spud is, quite tricky to see, but he's on the branch behind, because he will still be fed by the parents for quite a while as he's exploring that tree. The parent goes off this morning, 4:36. There he is on the branch. You can see by the movement of his head, he's still so curious, still sussing out his environment. And then we saw him high up on the branch. And then he goes from Spud to Spudnik. Yay! Not so good, no. He falls down into the grass. And remember, last week we saw a fox prowling in that area. So that was a bit of jeopardy, and we were concerned about him because he'd make a little meal for a fox, or probably a big meal for a fox. So we were relieved to see him in this tree later on. And in fact, he's remained, look at that face. It's a content face, isn't it? He's remained in that tree for most of the day. Remember, they're nocturnal, so he will be resting. I say he, it could be a she. But you can't call him it, can you? Spud will be resting for the rest of the day. So we're going to go to a live camera that's actually on that tree now to see if Spud is still there. Is he there? Yeah, look, there's Spud. It's so great to see him out, isn't it? And he will probably stay out now. I doubt he'll go back into that box. When you've got this environment to look at, why on earth would you want to get back into just staring at four walls? He looks good, doesn't he? I know you're not supposed to have favourites, but, well, he kind of has become my favourite.
No, he's kind of sat there in his underwear waiting for his adult feathers to grow, you know. I think he'll be active tonight, though, moving around in that tree, there's no doubt about it. Might get back into one of the bigger oak trees. He's in that little, looks like a willow or something that he's found some shelter there for today.
And I don't think I've really made it a secret, have I? The tawny owl is my favourite. The little single chick that we've called Spud. Let's take a look at that live. He's obviously not in the nest anymore because he's come out of the nest. Oh my goodness, I'm sure he's grown since yesterday. Look at those feathers that have started to come through. That is amazing how quickly that has happened. He's been hanging around in the tree in the day, but at night he starts to move about, branching from one branch to another, exploring his immediate surroundings. He's not alone there, though. There's the adult, and the adult's still watching the chick and provisioning. And this will continue for some time until Spud develops his flight feathers and perfects his flying. We've seen him flapping a bit. We saw him take a little bit of a flight yesterday. Didn't end up too well. He crash landed on the ground, but he's certainly branching out to those higher branches. And there's our Spud doing exactly what we'd expect him to do. But as I say, it's amazing how those feathers have changed just in a day, isn't it? So he might not be around for much longer.
Right, now I'm going to ask you a question which every single viewer knows the answer to already. I'll just go through it, you know, for the sake of it. Which bird would you say was the, you know, the star of our series this year?
Let me think about that for 1 second. Spud, the tawny owl.
It would be Spud for you, wouldn't it? Why don't we go live to see how Spud's getting on? Where is he? He's been branching. He's shown quite a lot of capability when it comes to climbing up in the trees. There, now what about that as a view? Right in the top of the oak tree, a little bit squinty in the evening sunshine, sporting his primary feathers there on the left-hand side, so he's beginning to look mildly more adult. But that's a lovely view of a little tawny owl at the top of a tree on a sunny evening, isn't it? But what about the rest of his life? How about Life and Times of Spud the Owl 2025? Meet Spud. Just a few days old, but all by himself. And if there's one thing Spud loved to do, it was sleep. And this is where he got his name, from his resemblance to a fluffy potato. But Spud also had quite the appetite, with his diligent parents bringing in food, big and small, even if it got a bit confusing at times. But as the days went on, the food was doing its job, and Spud was starting to think, outside the box. Taking a long look at the outside world, he decided that it's not for him just yet. Over the next few nights, Spud's bravery grew, propelling him to new heights. Until finally, a leap of faith. Now, his first test flight might have ended in a crash landing, but flying the nest is an important step in any young owl's life. For now, he's sleeping peacefully in a new tree, and the world outside his box looks just that little bit brighter.